Welcome to Session 2 of Putnam County Charter School Systems ESOL Professional Learning. This professional development is designed to meet the requirements of our district's Title III teacher training requirements. In this session, we will be discussing the 5 components of effective oral language instruction. Before we begin, please make sure you have your handout available, titled Teaching a Variety of Spoken Texts. The first question you are probably asking yourself is, what is oral language instruction? And what does this have to do with the subject that I teach? Oral language instruction is an umbrella term that encompasses every form of listening and speaking that goes on in your classroom. Lectures, Q&A, and student discussions are all part of oral language instruction. You are already using oral language in your classroom. The goal of this training is to help you more intentionally plan the speaking and listening components of your lessons in order to maximize their effectiveness for student learning. Intentional and effective oral language instruction is critical for every classroom, every subject, and every grade level for 3 key reasons. First, oral language is our first and most frequently used form of communication. On a day-to-day basis, your students will generally use their speaking and listening skills far more than their print literacy skills as they interact with the world around them. Second, oral language is our students' primary means of describing, structuring, and evaluating the world around them. If we want students to assimilate the new information we are providing, we must make sure they can process what they are hearing and discuss it in an appropriate and comprehensible way. Finally, when executed correctly, intentional oral language instruction helps students to combine their critical thinking skills and prior knowledge with new information and skills to create new and lasting knowledge. In this lesson, we will look at a brief overview of the 5 components of effective oral language instruction, and we will discuss how you can implement these elements in your classroom. The first key component of oral language instruction is developing students' listening and speaking skills. There are many ways to approach this task, but today I'm going to talk about 3 that you can start using in your classroom right away. They are: invite students to be part of a meaningful dialogue, explicitly model desired listening and speaking patterns, and plan specific opportunities for oral processing. The first way that you can encourage students to develop their speaking and listening skills is to invite them to be part of a meaningful dialogue. You do this by asking them open-ended or multi-level questions. Open-ended questions are questions with no right answer, and multi-level questions have many different possible right answers. When asking these types of questions, be sure to give students plenty of wait time to process the question and form a response. Finally, keep the dialogue flowing by following up on student responses. Start by rephrasing what the student said, and then ask him or her to clarify or expand on the answer. This back and forth style of conversational learning is critical in helping students build knowledge, but too often it is missing from our students' day-to-day classroom experience. Another tool in your oral language toolbox is to intentionally model productive listening and speaking skills to your students. Show them how to be active listeners by using attentive body language to listen when they are speaking to you. Also, as the classroom manager, you are responsible for enforcing respectful listening by not allowing students to talk when someone else has the floor. When speaking to students, take care to model the type of language you want them to use when discussing the material. This includes using academic vocabulary, complex sentence structure, and organized thoughts. When students are speaking, don't settle for short, one word answers from them. Instead, push them to defend and expand their answers by asking them follow up questions. Have the academic vocabulary you want students to use displayed prominently in the classroom, for example, on the board or on a word wall, so that it is readily accessible for students to use when giving oral responses. Finally, if you truly want to increase your students' oral language abilities, you must intentionally plan specific opportunities for listening and speaking into your lessons. Incorporate planned pauses in your lessons for guided Q&A with students. Plan the questions ahead of time so that you can be sure they are higher order questions that will promote critical thinking and general discussion. You can use technology to help spawn conversation by having students send in their responses via digital media. Platforms like Kahoot or Poll Everywhere are great for gathering student responses and discussing the results. Another option that does not require technology is having students draw different question cards and then taking turns sharing their responses with the class. Or you can practice listening skills with a classic game of I have, who has. Our second component of oral language instruction is to teach a variety of spoken texts. All language is not equal. The type and structure of language that we will use depends on the purpose we are trying to accomplish. When presenting an oral language task to students, we must teach them the type of language needed to respond appropriately to the task. And then we must give them opportunities to practice those language structures in a comfortable, supported setting. Here is an overview of some of the different functions of language and the types of language used to accomplish those functions. Please refer to your handout, Teaching a Variety of Spoken Texts, for further information on this topic. Our next key component of oral language instruction is to create a language learning environment. This refers not only to the physical environment, although a comfortable learning environment is important, but it also refers to the context for learning. Oral communication is all about purpose and audience. As teachers, if we want to motivate our students to become better communicators, we must strive to provide students with authentic and relevant contexts for the language they produce. Vocabulary development is a critical component of oral language instruction. As teachers, we often think of vocabulary in the context of literacy, in students reading and writing. But if students cannot comprehend what they hear in class and cannot reliably use academic vocabulary in their spoken communication, then they will not be able to recognize the words on tests or use them in writing. Therefore, we must be proactive when teaching students new vocabulary to also teach them oral strategies for remembering these words. We must go beyond copying definitions from a glossary and instead focus on presenting words in context. Make sure you are using multiple modes of presentation so that students are constantly hearing, seeing, and using the target vocabulary in numerous different ways and contexts throughout the unit. Finally, the final component of our oral language instruction that we will look at today is promoting auditory memory. Auditory memory involves students' ability to process and recall the information that they hear. There are numerous ways to promote auditory memory. Here, I've presented just a few possible ideas. Having students repeat after you when learning new words may seem archaic, but When used intentionally, it can be a great way to help draw students' attention to important new vocabulary. Pairing vocabulary with an appropriate visual or graphic organizer is also helpful, especially if you consistently use that same visual throughout the unit. Use your visuals as a memory cue to help students recall the associated vocabulary words. Poems, songs, rhymes, and mnemonics are not just effective for younger students. Older students and even adults also find these things helpful for memorizing difficult chunks of information. Be sure to include oral check ins throughout the lesson to give students a chance to process new information out loud. This will help them move it into their stored memory. Thank you for your attention to this professional development. Please remember to return to the Google form and mark that you completed the training video. Then please click Submit so that your response will be counted. If you have further questions about this material or any difficulties completing the online form, please contact your school's ESOL teacher.